Actually saying 0.5 of a rulebook has been released might be generous. We're still waiting on a points document, a compatibility document for all the codices, updated faction packs, and evidently a new errata before the rules ever come out. Although this is the book that will be in the launch box, it is not the full rules. The full rules are digital, and what we have been given digitally so far is a PDF copy of the paper rules. Anything bubbled out in green text is a hyperlink for the app. Games Workshop has had constant criticism that the rules and the codex are outdated before launch. Well, it can't be outdated if they haven't released it in print. A lot of the rules for 11th edition are only going to be available in digital form. Good, yes, we're moving forward with digital rules, but don't give half a rulebook and then have you open it and see that there's a box that says, if you want the full rules, you need to go get the app. It's really bad if you thought you got the rules when you bought the rulebook. It's also bad for future use, as you also have to preserve the legacy of digital rules. Every edition there are people that say, I'm going to go and play a different edition of 40k. Well, it's harder to do that with 11th edition if you get out your 11th edition core rules and that is not the rules, and the app may not be supported for the future. So you're trying to scrabble together a rulebook, which is also what we're trying to do at the moment. Why is this really bad? Well, it is very noticeable that Games Workshop has been slipping in the past few months. They had a very bad appearance at the UK Games Expo, where it looks like their local stores were told last minute to throw something together. They've had lots of live streams with terrible or non-existent audio. They had a Q&A that left more questions than it answered, and now an unfinished rulebook. Why is there an unfinished rulebook? Well, they didn't have the chance to delay a book printing. The release date has been decided 3 years ago. That should give them enough time to make a set of rules. But in the meantime, everyone who would be making those rules is also fixing 10th edition. Rules patches and balance patches, points patches, codex patches for codexes that haven't been released yet but need to be patched before they're out. Even though it was only made public recently, the launch date of 11th edition has long been known, and we can now predict that June 2029 will see a 12th edition of 40k. Anything not in the rules, or not finalized before printing, would be marked as a later fix. An incomplete rulebook was then sent off to the printers and distributed, and the fix-it-later attitude of Games Workshop towards rules continues. Release the rules, and then patch it later. Some people like this as it makes it seem like Games Workshop is actively and constantly engaging with the community to fix things. Other people think, well, I noticed the problem within an hour of reading, and I don't even play that much. And it's not even my job to look at rules. In the core rules that we have, you will see or not see that there are important rules missing. Rules separated out into digital only, where they are easy to update and game patches are included. Playtesting is not really done by modern Games Workshop. The quality of their rules attests to that. And why should they? Any issues, big or small, are noticed by a massive community within the day. If anything, spending money and staff time on playtesting would be irresponsible for the company. Despite all this, the edition rules may be fine after 6 weeks of digital updates. The core rulebook is valuable, as long as you don't use the rulebook as a reference for rules and instead use it to mark area terrain on the table. The first rule that's missing is sort of a choice. The most important rule. Not that, oh, if you have a problem, roll off, but that this is not a competition to win, but a game to be played. As Games Workshop has gone on to support the competitive scene a lot more, it is more of a competition. For many people, that is how it's played. But I thought that this edition, when we're focusing more on a narrative experience, they would say the most important rule is to make sure you have fun, not to use the rules to beat your opponent over the head and go, haha, I gotcha. Bring back the most important rule. Aircraft have been in the game since, well, they've been in the game for about 10 years now. They were good for a bit, then they were too good, and now they barely get anything. The way aircraft work in 11th edition is they turn up from reserves, they don't do anything except shoot. Your opponent has a chance to attack them, and then at the end of the opponent's turn, they leave the board. They do that over and over until they're dead or the game ends. There is the hover rule. Hover does not remove the aircraft rule as it did in 10th edition. What it does is ignore the 2-inch maximum movement when you take to the skies. Something that aircraft can't do because they never move. This is a pointless rule unless there's later going to be a patch, or unless there's a rule to say for each individual thing that has hover, whether it starts in, like, not aircraft mode or not. But I would have had that as a core rule if it's meant to be here as a main rule. Helldrake players are panicking because the Helldrake's job is to not just turn up and shoot things, but to jump in and claw things apart. If you cannot charge with aircraft, it cannot attack. And it relies on enemy units that can fly to charge it, then it can fight back against them. I feel that even if this is later fixed, this is a rule we should have had here in the core rules. From people who have already been given updated versions of the rules, which is to say heavily patched and errated and, not for day one release, they've said there's a kind of super hidden, gone to ground. -3 to detection range if a terrain feature is in the way of line of sight to the unit in cover. It shows that Games Workshop massively overestimated how powerful hidden would be, as also evidenced by the amount of detachments that come with rules to increase or reduce hidden. The community is thinking, that's probably not going to come up that much, except on the first turn. Otherwise, we're used to having lots of terrain on the table and moving close to the enemy. Even Tau players have noticed this. But it means pure strain gene stealers can be hidden. That's a 15-inch range of no, you can't shoot me. Then they use a -6 to the detection range stratagem, and then -3 gone to ground, so they cannot be shot unless the enemy is within 6 inches. Except that is not the case. The core rules are also missing characteristic modifiers. As in last edition, anything about modifying characteristics and the cap on them comes in the rules commentary, like errata, addendum, bonus part, the appendix, but not within the PDF. The number of times you can modify ballistic skill, how high you can have a save. And for hidden, it's going to say that you cannot be hidden better than 9 inches or worse than 30 inches after all modifiers. We're also missing the order that you apply modifiers. This is important. This is not a common sense thing. Because if you want to get the most attack power, you would do additions, then multiplications, but that's not necessarily the case. There's also important rules missing. The heal rule isn't in the core rules. This was also missing from the leaks, which made people, including me, think, well, maybe this is just an earlier unfinished version of the rules. No, this is an earlier unfinished version of the rules that they then released. In several places we have the heal rule mentioned, but there's no explanation of what it is or how it works. That's for later digital updates. When you get your codex and it has the heal ability and you want to look up what the heal ability does, you can't find it in the core rulebook. It's also missing the big important things of how you make an army to play the game. No mention of points values, no army construction rules, nothing about picking a warlord, choosing detachments, what a detachment is. This was stuff that's also missing from the launch box. Could you just give us a basic detachment so that people who don't know how to play 40k and haven't been playing for years can get 2 armies, see that there is a detachment, and then play against each other? In the articles that Games Workshop has been releasing, they go on and on about force dispositions. But to know your force disposition and compare your force disposition and to use the cards that are in the launch box, the mission deck 2026-2027, you need to know what a force disposition is, how you get one, and that's all tied to detachments, which are not explained in the core rules. And then I bet we'll find that the app says your force disposition is linked to your detachment. Each detachment has an assigned force disposition. You choose one of the available force dispositions out of the detachments you had to make your army. But the mission deck says you can just pick a force disposition. So there's a difference between playing with the mission deck and playing using the app and the mission deck. This app better be free, otherwise you paid for a book that tells you to pay for an app to see more of the rules. Which toughness characteristic you use on a unit is also not particularly clear. It does explain that you use the highest toughness of a bodyguard unit in an attached unit. That is not something you can search for in the PDF. You have to look for T under attached unit rules, not toughness. That is where it's hiding. But there's no explainer on other mixed units, like a unit that has a toughness 6 model and a toughness 4 model. I know that the Deathwatch have their own rule for their Aquila kill team, but this is something I would have thought should be in the core rules. Toughness characteristic. How do you define it? When do you define it? How do you check what the toughness of an enemy unit is? It's an important part of shooting. And that's before we get to the exploits that people have spotted, and the oh my, that's unusual. One that I've spotted so far that I don't think other people may have noticed. When you're falling back, it's not like 10th edition. If you're battle shocked, you have to do a desperate escape. Every model in the unit takes a hazardous test. On a 1 or a 2, your unit takes a mortal wound. Or if you're not battle shocked, you can do an ordered retreat. However, the only way to move through enemy models when you're retreating is to pick a desperate escape. Even if there is one of your models that goes through the enemy, if you want to actually get out of combat, the entire unit has to choose desperate escape. Every model in that unit takes a hazardous test, not just the ones that are falling back through the enemy models. If you can consolidate around one particular model in the enemy unit so that they cannot fall back without going through your unit, you can do a lot more damage. It is different to the previous edition. Is that intentional? Or are we going to see another FAQ on that, perhaps before the game releases on the 20th of June? There's a lot of fixing to be done, a lot of silly rules to point out, and a lot of fun to be had with a new edition of 40k. This is Type 2 fun. Have a great day of 40k.